Hello my friends, my name is Tamitha. Welcome to my kitchen. Today we're doing something that I have been waiting for. We've made a lot of individual ingredients and I've been asked many times, will you show us how to use them? Today is one of those episodes. I've done a few in the past. I'm really excited about this one because in this one video, we are going to be using our homemade citrus sugar, our homemade extracts, our homemade strawberry balsamic jam. I'm going to teach you how to make stabilized whipped cream, which is, I'll explain that to you shortly. We're making a cake from scratch. We are making one of my very favorite butter cakes from scratch. And we're going to be using mascarpone. Now, I have not taught the lesson on that yet, but it's coming soon. So in the meantime, this is an easy purchase. They sell it in most better grocery stores. I think that's it. So we've got a lot of homemade stuff that we've had in our pantry, and we're going to bring it together in a beautiful dish. So what we want to do is get all of our ingredients ready to go before we start anything. That's just good practice when you're baking. That way you don't find out in the middle of baking that you're missing an ingredient. It's called mise en place. It's what is always done in professional kitchens, and I wouldn't even consider making anything without having all of my ingredients ready to go. And by that I mean already measured, any weights that have to be taken, all done. It just makes the process much more fun. Okay, so now this recipe, as you know, is going to be one of those recipes where I show you how to use a lot of the different ingredients that we have made by hand. So in this one recipe, we've got our homemade creme fraiche. We've got our homemade extracts, two of them right here, the Fiore di Sicilia and our vanilla. We've got our homemade lemon vanilla sugar. We are using in between the layers of the cake our homemade strawberry balsamic basil and black pepper jam. This is our sugar here. Now, when you're dealing with sugars like this, if you had little bits of dried vanilla bean, make sure that you sift it out if there's any tiny pieces. You don't want to find that in your cake. We've got our flour. We've got a stick of butter softened. Now, I'm making the small version. In the recipe, in the printed recipe, I give you both for a 6-inch and a 9-inch cake because this is a 2-layer cake. It's very rich. It's got that beautiful filling. And then I've got a gorgeous stabilized whipped cream. I don't know if you've ever seen that before, so I'm going to show you how it's done, again, in restaurants, because we like to make these creams in advance. We can't be whipping cream right at the last moment, so we make what's a stabilized whipped cream, and I'll show you how to pipe that on so you have a beautiful finish. And of course, 3 eggs from our lovely ladies outside. Okay, so now we're all set up. We've got our pans here. Now the first thing we want to do is line our pans. Never bake a cake without using parchment to line your pans. Is there anything worse than going through all the trouble of making a cake from scratch only to have it stick right in the middle, so when you flip the cake out you get a hole or it tears? That breaks my heart. So I'll show you how I prepare a pan like this. Now this is a baking pan release. So it's one of the few exceptions I make in my kitchen where I am using something that is actually an aerosol. And even though I have sprayed the pan, I always, no matter what, line the pan. Don't have to worry about the sides, but 1000%, you have to worry about the bottom. You never know, and it's just not worth it. And even though they're lined, I still spray. I want to make sure that I can get the paper off without lifting any crumbs from the top of my layers. So before we even move over to the mixer, we've got our flour. I'm using King Arthur. Whenever you're baking, whenever you're doing anything, use the best ingredients that your budget allows. It does make a difference. So we've got our flour, we've got our baking soda. Now it's a very small amount because this is a pound cake recipe, and that's our salt. It's a pound cake recipe, so most of the lift in a pound cake actually comes from the creaming of the butter and sugar and eggs. That is where we get most of our lift, and that is from the air that we are going to work into that mixture. So before you you never want to take your dry ingredients and drop them into the mixing bowl one at a time. Mix them in advance so that you know they're already even and ready to go. We're over at the mixer. We are using the flat beater attachment. We do not use the whisk attachment. I never use the whisk attachment unless I am whipping egg whites. Other than that, I prefer the beater attachment. I find using the whip attachment extremely annoying, and anything that you're using it for gets stuck inside the balloon whisk, and you end up beating a lot of your air out trying to get it out of the whip. So for that reason, I use the flat beater attachment, which is this one. Okay. So always, again, you set up your station as you're ready to go. We've got our butter, our sugar, our eggs already out of the shells. Never, I see people do this all the time and it always stresses me out. Please don't break your eggs directly into your mixing bowl. If you get shells in there or you get a bad egg, you've now wasted all of your ingredients. It takes just an extra moment to break them into a bowl and you're guaranteed to have pristine eggs. So we are going to start by dropping in our butter. The butter is soft. Get you right over here. And we want to get as much air into this as possible. Remember, the point is that when you're making a pound cake, a good chunk of your lift is coming from the air that you incorporate during this step. Now you see we're sticking to the bottom of the bowl. That's not going to work. We're going to use our rubber scraper and get it all off because we need every bit of this to be worked by the blade, or excuse me, the paddle, not stuck to the sides. We'll never get the lift that we want if we don't do this. I know it's tiresome. Now, do you see how light this is? You see this? Now, this is what we're looking for. Now, this butter went in bright yellow and it's almost white. That's air that has caused that change, and we want that. And we're going to keep whipping once we add the sugar. We want to get as much air to be locked in to this butter as possible. Same thing here. We are stuck to the bottoms and sides of the bowl in order to keep getting all of our air and make sure that we've really gotten it all done. We want to scrape down every bit. And I scrape off on my blade. Okay, and also scrape the blade, or paddle, excuse me. Okay, you want to get everything that you can. And there's a little divot in the bottom of the bowl. Make sure you get that. Things like to hide in there, and they show up at the end as unmixed batter. Very rude. See the color, it's dark even though this is a white sugar that we were using, because this is a sugar that we added lemon zest and vanilla bean to, and that's what gave it its color. So now we're going to add one egg at a time. You don't add the next egg until this one has been worked in completely. And you're going to have to scrape the bowl down between each egg. And I like to add my extract in 2 little splashes. That was 1. Second egg, last little bit of extract. Now you see it's starting to hold air. The eggs incorporate into there are starting to allow this air that we've been working in to be pretty much form an emulsion, and it's trapping that air. That's key. And egg number 3. This is what we're looking for. Do you see that really beautiful, fluffy, aerated texture? This is what you want. This is going to help us get that velvety texture when the cake is done. A storm rolled in and it got suddenly very dark in here, so I had to bring over additional light. Now we're going to be adding our dry mix, and we're going to alternate with our crème fraîche or sour cream, whichever one you're using. You're going to start and end with your flour. So it's going to be 3 additions of flour and 2 additions of, in my case, crème fraîche. Okay, so that's the first little bit. Helps if that's down. Now you want to be careful not to overbeat. This is, if we overbeat here, we would activate the gluten in the flour and you end up with a tough cake. So we are going to mix this just until the dry ingredient has been taken up. That's enough. Now, I'm using crème fraîche. You could be using sour cream. Crème fraîche adds just a little bit more of a tanginess. It's really quite lovely. We made it. I will link the video for you. It is a wonderful ingredient. It is not difficult at all to make, and I think once you have it, you'll never want to be without it. Just like that, that's taken up. We add another bit of flour. That's taken up. And I want to make sure we get every bit of our crème fraîche, because remember, we weigh. So the formula is based on being very, very accurate. So we don't want to leave anything out. Scrape with a rubber spatula. I know I seem like I'm being persnickety. I don't mean to be, but when it comes to baking, these are formulas, not recipes. And then our last bit of flour, and in there again was flour, salt, and baking soda. Notice I'm not keeping this on high. It is quite low. And I'm going to do the last little bit by hand. I don't want to risk over mixing this batter, so I'm actually going to do the last little bit with the rubber spatula. It really does make a difference. To make sure you get perfectly even cakes, layers, what you're going to want to do, I know it seems like I'm being persnickety again. I don't mean to be, but you want to weigh. So we've got an empty bowl. This is just the bowl I had the dry ingredients in. We put it on the scale. We hit tare, and we are going to weigh our batter so that we can divide that number in half and make sure that the exact right amount is in each cake pan. Each layer needs to weigh 430.5 grams. We'll smooth them out after we have them weighed. If you don't have a scale, can you just eyeball it? Yes, it won't be perfect, but I don't think the queen is coming for dinner either. So I do 427, excuse me one moment, 0.5, okay? Which means the rest can go right into here. This batter tastes incredible. Now you do not want to knock the air out. You know, there are some cake recipes where you can bang them on the counter to even them out. That works if you've got a chemical leavener in your cake. In this particular case, we do not. So for that reason, we are very carefully just going to run an offset spatula or a tiny rubber spatula, which is what I happen to have grabbed. It doesn't matter. Don't scrape the side, because remember the side is sprayed, so we don't want to harm anything. But we want to make sure that we are even across. We don't have a big lump in the middle. Another little tip, I never put cake pans in just individually like this. Even if it's just one pan, I put it on a sheet pan. Number one, it serves as a source of insulation. So it slows the bake down just a little bit, but it helps keep things even. And number two, it makes it easier to get the pans out without having to grab little tiny things with your big oven mitts or something like that, or whatever you're using. I tend to use a towel. But just use a sheet pan as long as it's flat. You don't want a sheet pan that's got a big hump in it, because that's just going to give you a crooked cake. Now we're just going to real quick make the syrup that we're going to soak. This is called a soak, in case this is the first time you experience this. And it's just hot water and your sugar. Now this is where you can get creative. You can add different flavors of all sorts of things, alcohols, things like that. In this particular case, we are using our sugar that is a citrus sugar that we made. So it is the vanilla and citrus. And then I'm just going to throw it in the microwave to make sure everything is nice and dissolved, and have it ready when our cake layers are ready. There's all different things you can do for cake soaks. They are a lot of fun. I do have some little bits of vanilla bean floating around in here, so when I am done making the syrup, I will run it through a sieve to make sure all the little bits of vanilla bean are gone. Super simple, makes a huge difference, adds a nice layer of moisture. It does not, in this case, change the flavor, which is what I don't want to happen. When you've got a very simple cake and you want to have an additional flavor that is unexpected or just a little sample, a cake soak is a really nice spot to do it. So you see, it almost looks like tea. And that again is because we have so much vanilla, the color coming off of that vanilla, and you see all those little bits of vanilla bean and the pod itself floating around in there. Well, I don't want that in my syrup. I don't want that anywhere. So we made sure that this is nice and hot. This is a 1/4 cup of our citrus vanilla sugar and a 1/4 cup of water. And I've just got a nice fine sieve and a bowl. You can never have enough sieves because this makes the difference between things that are perfectly flavored and smooth and things that aren't. That's what I sieved out of there. And we just let this cool. As always, we don't put anything in the oven without knowing exactly where it's going to land when it comes out of the oven. General rule, you never want to get caught with something hot in your hands and have no safe place to put it down. Okay, so our layers are out of the oven, and I wanted to show you something. One of those little tricks to help you know when your cake is done. It pulls away from the sides. Do you see that? So you don't want to leave it in the oven so long that it overcooks, obviously. You want a nice moist cake, but you want to make sure that it's cooked through so you don't end up with a dip. If you pull your cake too soon, what you can end up with is a dent in the center. And that's unpleasant. You did all this work and then you end up with a dent. So a nice little window if you're not using a thermometer, which I always do, but if you're not using a thermometer, number one, if you can start to really smell your cake, check your oven. That's the first sign that you're getting close or you're right there. And the second, of course, is if you see your cake pull away from the sides. You know you're ready to go. I'm going to let this cake cool in the pan, and then when it gets down to warm, not cold, not all the way down, because we want it to drink our syrup. And it will drink the syrup better if the cake is still warm. Then tomorrow, we'll be able to assemble this cake. This is why you want this to be overnight. If we were just going to put the syrup on and then just keep going, would it work? If you're in a hurry, yes. But it will only have the surface having that flavor. If you want to have the cake have the time to really absorb that syrup, you want to give it overnight so that it really does pick up the flavor all the way through. It extends the life of the cake. It'll keep you moist for an extra few days, though I very much doubt you're going to need it. These cakes disappear. Silicone pastry brush. These are so easy to clean. You can run them through the dishwasher. The natural bristle ones are charming, but they're a total pain in the butt to clean. I don't want to. So we're just going to come through and liberally brush our syrup over both cakes, including the sides. That's why we keep it in the pan, so that every bit of our syrup will have a chance to be soaked in. If we did this just on a plate or on a rack, the syrup could run away, off to the sides and everywhere else, but not into our cake. Okay, so that's it. We'll keep doing this over the next however long it takes until all of our syrup is gone. Our cake layers have cooled overnight. The syrup has been fully absorbed. You see, they're just perfect. They're not soggy. There's no dip. So that means that we bake them correctly. We don't have a dent in the center. Okay, so we're going to take these out of the pan, and I'm going to show you how to level off the top because we do have a little bit of a dome, very common in butter cakes. So we'll take care of that. The ingredients for our stabilized whipped cream is going to be heavy cream, mascarpone cheese, powdered sugar. I also showed a recipe for making that from scratch. And we're going to use just a small amount of our Fiore di Sicilia extract. Now, if this isn't the one you choose to use, you can swap it out. But you want just a small amount of extract because the flavor of the cake is really beautiful, and the filling we're using is also just got a beautiful bright flavor. We're going to be using our homemade strawberry balsamic jam that we made just a few days ago, maybe a week at this point. So we've got our cake layer. Look how beautiful that is. That is what you get when you make sure that you use parchment paper under your cake layers. Even though the pan was sprayed, this guarantees you perfection. Now, if you look at the other side, this is the other side of the cake. I am on, here, let me back out here a little bit. This is a cake turntable, and this allows us to work all around the cake without having to wrestle. They're not particularly expensive. They're a fantastic tool, and I recommend them strongly. Okay, so, but we've got some upper edges on this cake that we have to take care of. We've got a little bit of, because the cake rose so beautifully, we are actually domed, which is actually a good thing. But I want these layers to be pretty flat. So I'm just going to cut using a serrated knife. I want to make sure the knife is longer than the cake that I'm using, that I'm cutting. And I just want to take off a bit off the top. So I'm going to saw very gently, lay the knife completely flat, so the knife is laying as flat as the plate, no angle. And we're just going to, because we're just taking off, we're not cutting the cake in pieces, we are just lifting off this top little layer. So as we move our way through, you'll see. Now, if this were a bigger cake, you'd have to turn it. This is not a big cake. I made the smaller version. There's only 4 of us home today. Now, never, 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 never get rid of your cake, your cake trim. I'll explain why shortly. Our cake soaked overnight in a syrup that we made with our homemade citrus sugar, so that aroma of that citrus is so bright. And our filling, I'm not going to use this to spread all the way to the end. I'm just kind of using this one to empty the jar. Beautiful strawberry aroma coming from here is remarkable. Now you want to get most of your filling in the center. When we put the top layer on, gravity will cause it to spread. Now we want a nice healthy amount, and this is perfect. I used a jar and a half. Now very gently, and this is why you want a turntable. This allows me to see very evenly, very easily I should say, where we are, where I have high spots, where I have low spots. We don't want any to fall off the edge, and I don't want it to drip. I don't want anything on the sides. I want the sides to stay bare. So try and avoid that. If it does happen, which listen, we're only human. A little paper towel will lift it. Don't smear. Okay. So now you see I have a little bit of room. I'm keeping away from that edge just a bit. I'm pushing back from the edge. You see that? Now, do we want our final cake to have it pushed back from the edge? We do not. So the reason I push back from the edge is when I go to add the next layer on top and I press down to make sure that the top layer is seated, that's going to push our filling out, and it should be perfect. So we're going upside down, so the bottom of the cake becomes our top. Let me make sure I'm in the camera. And we're just going to press, and we are done. That cake is seated. Now, very carefully, with the spatula, I'm going to roll completely around and see if I have any spots where I am sticking out too far or not enough. And this is the time to make those adjustments. Okay, so I see that I have, there we go, because we want the filling to show. Now, if you want to make sure you are dead on perfect, you can use a level to make sure that your cake is seated just right. I am going to resist the urge to be absurd and use a level right now, but if it weren't for the fact that I'm trying to prove that I'm not crazy, I would break out my level. Yes, I have a tiny level that I use just for this sort of thing. Okay, so I have a little bit sticking out here, and I just very gently, with my spatula, and this allows me to keep it so nice and neat. And it ends up looking Very, very intentional, very, very tidy. Now you see I have a little bit right there. With the offset spatula, I just lift and tuck, and anything that comes out comes off. Okay, now this couldn't be easier. We already made the filling. We made it last week. The cakes we made yesterday, they soaked overnight. The sugar we made, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks ago. The extracts we made months ago. So this is all stuff that we were able to pull from our pantry, and we were able to pull together a truly beautiful cake. Now we're going to do the finishing touches. Okay, so what we have to do first is we have to soften our mascarpone cheese. It is very, very important. You have to do this first. If you try to whip the cream first, you will end up with lumps. Please do the mascarpone first. You want to whip it until it's soft and creamy and smooth. Now we're going to add our heavy cream. Once I have made sure that the mascarpone and the cream are well incorporated, I switch to the whip attachment. I am going to add the tiniest splash of the Fiore di Sicilia extract. I mean a teeny tiny, like a quarter of a teaspoon, just for a hint of flavor. When our cream is about halfway to where we want it to be, we will add our powdered sugar and a teeny tiny pinch of salt. We want to make sure that there's none of our mascarpone stuck anywhere, so we're just going to scrape just to make sure. Now there's probably nothing or very little, but it doesn't matter. I don't want any lumps. We want this to be a luxurious, creamy, beautiful topping for our cake. I changed the speed and I brought the speed up because now we're adding air to our cream. Now I'm going to start to add my powdered sugar. Now we have it on low so that we don't cover ourselves in powdered sugar. That's very unpleasant. It's funny on I Love Lucy, it's not funny in real life. Once the powdered sugar has moistened, we can take the speed back up. Just real quick, see the difference in the texture? Stay close by. You can't take calls right now. We're not making butter. Stay close by. We want to be right about here. This is where we're going to check it. Now, I don't care for very hard whipped cream, so I like to stop just short of that firmness. I'm going to check it with a rubber spatula. See how nice and creamy that is? We don't want any lumps, but we don't want it over whipped either. See? It stays right on there. I think we'll stop right there. You're kidding me. All this time I thought that it was recording and it was not. Okay, all I did was take the cream and drop it on top. And I put a lot on there because I want the height. I want it to be kind of dramatic. Because we've got such nice thick layers of cake, strawberry cake. I wanted a little height for a little drama on top. So now I'm just going to smooth Then we go to the garden. You want to grab the tiny little tips of the mint, not the big leaves. And you go directly across. So it's 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock. and then you can fill in from there. We made that with ingredients we made from scratch here at home. The strawberries we grew outside. And now we're just going to take this cake, we're going to put it in the fridge, and it's ready to serve when dinner is ready because our cream is stabilized. Don't forget to take the cake out about 45 minutes before you need to serve it so that it's at room temperature, because that's when it is perfect. You will have that velvet texture. Each one of the flavors will sing for you. Your family will love this. And it was probably one of the easiest cakes you'll ever make, considering how fancy it ends up looking. Thank you for coming to visit with me today. I am so glad you're here. I hope you enjoyed this. Please give it a try. If you've been doing the food projects with us all this time, you have all of these ingredients on your shelf. I love you so much. I'll see you next time.